Trypanosoma cruzi is a unicellular eukaryotic parasite that causes the disease called Chagas disease, or American trypanosomiasis. It's primarily found in Central America and parts of South America, but we're seeing an increased prevalence and incidence in North America, particularly due to international travel. We find that roughly 10 million people worldwide are affected, and when we look at the sort of transmission mode of Trypanosoma cruzi, here's where we have the introduction or the added information about biological vectors in the form of insects that bite. The biological vector that transmits the parasite Trypanosoma cruzi is a triatomine bug, more commonly called the kissing bug. And yes, we find species of triatomine in North, Central, and South America, and we do see increasing prevalence of American trypanosomiasis in areas in North America where perhaps we hadn't thought of before, such as in states like Virginia. Trypanosoma cruzi is a single-celled organism that has a unique endomembrane structure. It has a flagellum that's sort of trapped within the membrane of the cell and runs linearly down the length of the body of the cell and helps the organism to move sort of by a wriggling motion in the tissue or the body of the individual that becomes infected. With the triatomine bug, in the process of biting, and we have the parasite in essentially the mouth parts of the insect, the parasite gets injected during the blood feeding process. You can see in the photo on the left at the bottom of the screen an illustration of a single cell of Trypanosoma cruzi. At first glance, students often think, gee, that kind of looks like a worm. But if you compare the structures around it, which are red blood cells or erythrocytes, we do have that as a size comparison. Whenever we have erythrocytes in a photo or even on a slide when we're looking in the laboratory, I always use the size or the diameter of an erythrocyte as sort of a handy ruler or size comparison. Erythrocytes are roughly 7 microns in diameter, and so you can see that this single representative of Trypanosomi is roughly maybe 1.5 times the length of a single red blood cell. So it's pretty tiny. If we take a closer look at the actual structure of some Trypanosoma, you can see that it's clear once we've stained them, there are some unique structures internally within this single-celled organism. There is a well-defined oval-shaped nucleus. There's also another darkly stained structure called a kinetoplast. The kinetoplast seems to be, according to scientific research, intimately associated with this endoflagellum that's part of the motility structure for this single-celled organism. The kinetoplast has a fairly sizable portion of DNA packaged inside, and it also has, as part of its structure, mitochondrial aspects. So it's a unique type of possibly energy source for the motility of the kinetoplast attached or associated flagellum. If we take a look at sort of a cartoon drawing of a single cell of Trypanosoma cruzi, we can see that the kinetoplast is sort of a disc-shaped structure. Again, it's a unique structure that has both DNA, a fairly sizable percentage, roughly 25 to 30% of the whole cell's DNA, and has mitochondrial energy-producing aspects. A little bit further, sort of towards the middle of the cell, that's where we see the nucleus, which in this cartoon drawing is colored in green. The long blue structure that's at the top of this illustration of the cell is the endoflagellum. trapped just underneath the surface of the cytoplasmic membrane, and how this individual single-celled organism is going to move around within the body in the bloodstream. It can also do the same type of motility and movement in the lymphatic system as well. Trypanosoma cruzi can cause both acute and chronic disease. For an acute illness, we often see signs and symptoms of the introduction of the parasite at the site of the insect bite. Here in the top right-hand corner is an illustration of a little girl who's gotten bitten on the face by a Trypanosoma bug. And you can see the inflammation and the swelling in response to that insect bite and the introduction of the parasite has led to what's called a Romagn's sign, typically associated with an acute infection of Trypanosoma cruzi. If the infection proceeds, the parasite will disseminate throughout the body and localize and even migrate to vital tissue, such as the heart. And in fact, in some areas of the world, in North, Central, and South America, Trypanosoma cruzi can be one of the leading causes of heart disease. It's going to cause damage and irreversible problems in not only heart, but even liver and spleen. The illustration on the right, lower photo, is a sort of a picture of Trypanosoma in what's called a pseudocyst form. All those tiny little dots are the individual trypanosome type structures, and they form this little packet in cardiac tissue. All the purple cells that you see, those round purple cells, are white blood cells, and the pink striated tissue is cardiac tissue. Whenever you have anything growing in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's going to displace and damage that normal healthy tissue. And that's, of course, what happens when parasites start growing in our body structures like our heart. And so we can wind up with maybe even irreversible heart damage if these types of parasitic infections aren't diagnosed and properly treated. And in some cases, sometimes the patient actually has to sincerely and diligently request that their physician test them and make certain that they either do or don't have infection due to Trypanosoma cruzi. Often, physicians aren't going to have that organism at the top of their list to think, maybe this is what's causing this patient's symptoms. But if the patient knows they've been in parts of the world or they've possibly been exposed to a Trypanosoma bug or bitten by one, and they've been in a high-risk area, it's definitely the sort of the task of the patient to help educate and inform their clinician and to get the best care. The URL at the bottom of this image or this slide is actually an article from 2014 indicating that Northern Virginia has seen a tremendous increase in the prevalence of essentially American trypanosomiasis, in large part, again, because of changes in population and international travel. The infective and diagnostic stages of Trypanosoma cruzi are the trypanosoma cells in blood or tissue. It's estimated that there are possibly anywhere from 300,000 or more people in the United States that are infected and are asymptomatic. They're not going to really have any noticeable symptoms. The only thing that be in their history is, again, travel to certain parts of the world or even getting bitten by that particular vector. You can acquire this parasite also from mother to baby during pregnancy. It can be acquired through blood transfusion, organ transplant, consumption of Trypanosoma-contaminated food or beverages, or even in a laboratory accident. All of these have been well-documented occurrences of infection due to Trypanosoma cruzi.